All right, hey everyone. Hope everyone is having a great Wednesday today. I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes to dial in here. I see people coming in to the session. This is the first one of these we've done, so excited to be hosting and take the time today. So thanks for joining, and we'll be getting started here pretty quickly. Hey Brian, hey Terry, hey Matthew. Thanks for joining, guys. We've had some, I had a number of people send in some questions before. Obviously, the intent here was to do a live session and just open up some dialogue. There's a questions section in the GoToMeeting portal, so feel free now throughout the session here today to input your questions into that, and hopefully I'll get to all of them. I'll probably be kicking off with a few that were sent in advance just to get the discussion going, and hopefully it sparks some questions or some things that are top of mind. Hey Allison, thanks for joining. So look, maybe I'll jump right in here. For those of you who I haven't had the chance with to connect one-on-one, I'm Peter McMath. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at WPIC, sitting in our Vancouver office. This is one of 7 offices globally here at the firm. So I'm lucky to work with some amazing colleagues around the world. Obviously, we have a great team on the ground in China. Jacob, our CEO, has been in the market for a couple of decades. So really fortunate to get to work with people on the ground. Obviously, the last couple of years, many of us obviously our travel's really diminished, and so it's really great to have a really strong team in market to give me line of sight to what's going on. Not only through the brands that we get to work with every single day, but our own teams that are responsible to operate these programs in market for our clients. So look, the purpose of today's session is really to hopefully provide some educational value and some content to you guys. We wanted to provide this opportunity for like digital and ecom leaders to just ask questions that are top of mind related to the D2C space in China. You know, not being able to get into market, you know, with the quarantines and the travel lockdowns have made it really difficult for people to get kind of firsthand experience. A lot of my day-to-day here at WPIC is speaking with brands on a daily basis about the questions they have related to various stages of the journey, whether it be initial market entry or really mature brands that have been in market for decades and are looking to deal with the challenges, deal with the growth that they want to realize. So, as I mentioned, I'm really fortunate that, we get to work with some really amazing clients around the world that are live in market today, that are dealing with these things, that are building velocity and brand and revenue ultimately. And so, we want to answer some of these questions today. So there's been a number that have been sent through. I'm going to jump right in. We've only got 30 minutes. I'll be able to go a little bit longer. But hopefully you can navigate the questions and answers box, and those will go straight into my desktop here, so we can take those in real time. But to kick off, I've collected a couple of questions here. The first being, do we need a website? So this is really going to depend on a number of variables. I think to answer it from a point of view of assuming it is a new brand that's not yet active in market with little to no awareness in market, I think it's important to understand the ecosystem that your brand participates in. And as it relates to China, I mean, China is very much an app-based market. We would have staff in China that probably haven't been to a website in like 6 to 8 months. And so generally market activation for a brand is happening within the social media apps, happening within the e-commerce marketplaces. And this is really given to, the nature of the internet in China, that it's mobile first, right? Desktop UI really isn't a thing. And so as great as mobile responsiveness is today, it doesn't really beat the experience for an app. And so the apps in China have really dominated. And this has led to the way consumers engage with brands is far less web-based and far more app-based. And so generally, to keep the answer short here, no, you probably don't need a website. Later on, as you get to scale, as the brand has pull, and as you maybe want to own more of that customer experience directly, there's probably opportunities for that. But for earlier stage brands, we're generally not seeing a lot of web development happening in the market. The next question here, are cross-border e-commerce platforms like Tmall Global viable? Why are they so much smaller than the domestic counterparts? Really great question. There's a lot of confusion here. We're a Tmall partner. We operate, well over 150 odd Tmall programs for a wide variety of brands, both on cross-border and domestic. When you think about Tmall Global versus Tmall Classic, this is really a back-end operational difference that was designed for highly regulated industries. And so the confusion is that, well, Tmall Global is much smaller than Tmall Local. That is totally not the case. If you're a Chinese user, you effectively are accessing Tmall through the Taobao app on your phone. And if you're searching a keyword, a brand name, a Tmall Global store is going to appear, and so is a Tmall Local store will appear within that same search. And so if you think about the 900 million monthly active users that are on Taobao, Tmall every day, it's irrelevant whether your point of sale is on global versus domestic or local. And so the market size, if you will, is the same. The difference being, and when you see GMV stats being quoted on, Tmall Global is much smaller, really what that's a reflection of is that Tmall Global is only available for foreign entities. So if you're a Chinese brand or entity, you need a foreign entity to establish a presence and to register a Tmall Global store. And so there's really no difference in market size. It's more a reflection of Tmall Global not catering to local Chinese brands and a difference between foreign performance versus domestic brands inside of the market. So hopefully that clears that up. And again, for people coming in to this session here, feel free just to insert your questions in the chat, and hopefully I'll get to them today. So question number 3, how long does it take to launch a brand via Ecom in China? Really depends on the size and scale of the brand, the size and scale of the launch. We benchmark an average like 90-day deployment. The biggest dependencies there are supply chain and product availability. Post-COVID, we've got major supply chain issues. If your factories or vendors are backed up and we don't have product availability, that's going to be the #1 dependency. All the digital localization, planning, strat, generally for most mid-market organizations, think brands transacting in that $30 to $300 million a year range. It's about a 90-day ramp to go live. Moving on. Okay, how D2C marketing is relevant in a market where distributors already operate your brand, frustration, risks perceived by existing partners, risks of having redundant marketing budgets. So if I'm understanding this question correctly, so how do we make our own D2C marketing relevant if we already have distributors operating today, and how do we kind of avoid channel conflict? This is a really great question. Obviously, we're big proponents of brands really owning much of their own performance inside of the market, and much of the channels, if you will. But in a market where you have existing partners, the biggest thing and the biggest mistake that we see brands having is just lack of communication with that distributor. If a brand is going to lean in and invest in their own marketing on any given channel, whether it be an e-commerce marketplace, a social media platform, influencer marketing, the brand's intention is always, how do we grow the brand profile? How do we grow sales? How do we grow, how do we become more profitable and more sustainable inside of the market? If a distributor is not on board with a brand in their own right, investing in their own brand development, that's a big red flag for us. And so generally the concern from a distributor is that they don't want to be undercut, they don't want to be left with inventory, and this is usually a result of just poor communication. And so a lot of that can be resolved by stronger communication. It's something that we help facilitate a lot of our clients with, because there can be really great synergy. A lot of distributors on the ground may have really powerful networks that can be leveraged, but if it's not a unified approach and you don't have great communication with them, and the right hand isn't talking to the left hand, then there's going to be inherent conflict there and challenges. I don't see a lot of redundant marketing budgets. It's probably just lack of efficiency or poor deployment of that marketing budget. And again, this comes down to like, what is the strategy? And a lot of distributors usually aren't great marketers, right? Brands are great at marketing, distributors are great at distributing. And so, really understanding the strengths and weaknesses of that distributor, understanding what marketing activities they're doing or not doing, helping guide what they're doing, or taking more control over that. And so, the brand themselves taking control of social, just like you would own your own Amazon program, just like you'd own your own Facebook account. In China, we see a lot of brands kind of just throw WeChat and Weibo and Douyin and all these Chinese platforms. They're like, let's let the distributor handle it. We would be really voicing our concern to have that controlled by the brand and ensuring that the distributor feels that they're empowered and enabled by that. Okay, so number of other questions here. Will we get a copy of the recording? Yes, this is being recorded and I'll send it out after. What's another question here? Okay, question from Liz. Do we need to have large market share in Canada or North America before taking on a market like China or other Asian countries? The quick answer is no. In terms of waiting till you have large market share in a North American market before entering Asia, I mean, these are such different markets. A consumer in China, think about a Gen Z, woman that's buying makeup in China. I mean, they're protected by the firewall, meaning they don't have access to Facebook, they don't have access to Instagram, your website doesn't load. They are largely unaware of the size and scale of your brand outside of that market. And so it's really an opportunity to like set a first impression within China and not have to wait till you're at scale inside of other markets before taking on countries. I would suggest the bigger dependency is having the size and scale as a company and as an organization and the maturity as an organization to be able to expand internationally. And so understanding your own internal resources and bandwidth is most important in the decision and less about existing brand awareness. Okay, another question coming in from Jian. What new D2C trends have we seen in China? What are your thoughts about live streaming? Does that drive volume or is it just good for brand recognition? Okay, so ton of D2C trends, obviously, the biggest being the shift to social commerce. China has historically been dominated by the marketplaces. So everyone's familiar with Tmall and JD. They have really owned consumer spending in China for the last decade, if you will. The biggest shift has been brands starting to transact inside of social and the social media ecosystem. So that includes WeChat, it includes TikTok, it includes Xiaohongshu, which all now have commerce capabilities within it. We're going to be announcing a new partnership with TikTok here shortly for some new cross-border Ecom functionality. So stay tuned for that. And so that's the biggest shift, where are consumers spending their dollars, and that coming out of the marketplaces into the social media platforms, which we believe is a really great thing for brands because you can own much more of that customer. It's not Tmall's customer, it's now your customer. Live streaming has been really hot. It's been really hyped. I think everyone's aware of like the major live streamers in China. There's been some big press on them that moved mega dollars during like the 11/11 festival. Look, like anything, there's really great ones and there's really bad ones. Really great ones are, drive volume. They have an authentic audience. They align well with your target audience. And you're able to capture that attention for that 3-minute live stream, and you can convert that attention into a follower into your CRM to remarket versus a flash in the pan that you're not going to be able to remarket to or really capture that value. And so look, there's examples in our portfolio of brands that will do a 3-minute live stream and ship 40,000 units. And then there's examples of brands that, we've come across that, maybe their distributor said, hey, we want to invest in this live streamer that was pitched to them. They didn't really do their due diligence. They spent a ton of money on it. There wasn't really the plan to back up how we're going to capture and convert and remarket to that audience that they gained during that window of time. And they're not seeing a strong or a negative ROI on that. And so it's a really double-edged sword. I would suggest brands to start small, understand what they're getting themselves into, understand the past performance of a particular live streamer. It's a massive ecosystem. For context, we work with well over 1,000 KOLs, key opinion leaders, and KOCs, key opinion consumers, on a monthly basis across the portfolio. So we see a lot of good, a lot of bad, and everything in the middle. It's definitely great for building brand and building exposure, and the jury's out on profitability behind it, just given the variance in quality, if you will. Okay, another question coming in here. What is the marketing hierarchy in China? What are the main channels of marketing for e-commerce, as Facebook or Instagram doesn't exist? Are Chinese influencers an important consideration? So hierarchy is really going to depend on the vertical that you're in and the product or service that you sell, in terms of where the consumer time and attention is being placed. So really understanding, what apps and ecosystems your customer is participating in, from an importance and hierarchy standpoint. Look, the biggest equivalents are the classics. WeChat is by far the dominating player inside of the space, given its functionality. You also have different sides of WeChat: official accounts, personal accounts, and then mini programs. Mini programs are what I would describe as the closest to what we're familiar with as D2C here in North America. It offers full, HTML5 customizability. You can build anything you want in it, from loyalty programs to subscription payments. WeChat Pay is the only payment processor in China. Unlike Alipay, which doesn't support subscription payments, WeChat Pay does. So for D2C brands that have subscription models, this is really important. And the other big ones would be Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, owned by ByteDance. Extremely fast growing, massive adoption. Their commerce is absolutely taking off, and we're seeing pretty big growth there. In beauty, cosmetics, personal care, Xiaohongshu, known as Little Red Book, is really important. And so these would be some of the main platforms. In addition to that, Zhihu, which is kind of the Chinese version of Quora, a questions and answers forum that's quite relevant. Weibo, which would be similar to Twitter, if you will, would be the equivalent there. These are really relevant, really popular platforms inside of the market. And then the last part of that question: are influencers important? Absolutely. Again, kind of going back to the live streaming question, definitely an important consideration. Definitely tread lightly, be aware of who you're getting involved with, and some of their historical performance. Okay, let's keep moving on. Okay, how to sell D2C products, how to sell D2C products in China's online ecosystem: Tmall, Taobao, JD, Xiaohongshu. How to choose where to sell and where to communicate. Again, really need to understand your consumer, who they are, what demographic, what apps do they use. The answer is probably not like, is it Tmall versus JD? It's probably both, frankly. For most brands, it's both. It's more a matter of order of importance, lowest hanging fruit in terms of ROI. What's the fastest path to profitability with the least amount of investment? How do we start lean and mean, and how do we scale up? As you add channels, you're adding complexity. As you add complexity, you add cost. And so we want to, find the quick wins, connect quickly, prove it out, and scale it up accordingly. Another question here: what is the best way to enter the Chinese market for a skincare brand? Super relevant. I think a bit of context here. We work for a couple dozen skincare brands that are active in China today, from skincare cosmetics, beauty, personal care brands, kind of more broadly, if you will. Look, that trend in social commerce, if you think about the average Chinese user today, they're not scrolling through typing in skincare and Tmall. At least, there's a profile of customer that's going to be, maybe they search moisturizer, they filter rank by like most popular product inside of Tmall, and they start scrolling, and then they see like a high reviewed product, and it's on sale, and they'll buy that. That's a very narrow type of consumer that's like discount driven. They're looking for mass brands. That's not the majority. Most consumers in China, if you think about the digital journey, the life cycle of a consumer from like discovery through to purchase, where they're discovering brands is inside of social, just like we are today. So they're coming across an influencer that they already follow inside of TikTok. They engage with that content, not on a single piece of content, but on their 300th piece of content. They then link out to the WeChat page. They potentially follow that brand on WeChat. They get to know the brand. They get to know the best sellers. And they eventually purchase. And then that customer, from ultimately an influencer from social, then becomes a buyer. And as that buyer wants to start to repeat purchase, that purchasing behavior is generally going to fall into Tmall in a marketplace. And so when we think about entry for a skincare brand, we need to first build awareness, build presence inside of social, raise that awareness, ultimately drive traffic and clicks, and then convert that accordingly. And so we believe like social is extremely important for brands today, especially within the skincare vertical. Okay, again, I'll just encourage everyone, feel free to put your questions in. I know we've got another 10 minutes here, so I'm gonna try to get through as many of these as possible to get them all. So bear with me here. Okay, our pet brand has never done export. How would the process typically start? How difficult would it be for a South African product in this space to compete in the Chinese wet pet food market? Okay, so a little bit to unpack there. If you've never exported before, you're definitely going to need someone to hold your hand throughout the entirety of that process. And so that's going to be a new journey for the organization. The process I would suggest would start with some of the questions that you're asking further on. So can we be competitive within the market, right? Getting some intel, getting some market insights, some competitive insights on that wet pet food category is going to be really critical to build the confidence internally to then make the investments to commercialize. And so the first step I would suggest for a brand from anywhere in the world is going to be understand the market segment, understand your value proposition and how that fits into the market landscape, and really believe in your heart of hearts that, hey, we can be competitive here. And so, not a lot of concerns whether you're from South Africa or Southern Italy or South America. I mean, that what the consumer really cares about is the product, the brand, the quality, the customer service, and less so the country of origin, right? Within verticals like health and wellness, food and beverage, personal care, products that have high levels of trust, and pets one of those verticals where you have more pets than babies inside of the market, and it's growing at like 26% year over year. Ultimately, ensuring that you can be competitive and that you understand the consumer, the landscape, the price points, and the value proposition is what's most critical to start to make the right decisions on when and how you should enter that particular market. Okay, I see some more questions coming in here. How does a brand get in contact with influencers? Okay, so there's a lot of influencers within the community that are self-managed. That's becoming rarer and rarer given the size and scale of like the industry around influencer marketing and live streaming today. And so many brands, or many influencers rather, are managed by agencies. And so you'd have a digital agency like us that would have relationships with various agencies that would negotiate on an influencer by influencer basis. And so, when I think back to, some of the bigger like, athleisure brands that we launched here in the Canadian market back a decade ago, a lot of our work was presenting, here's 100 different influencers, here's everything they've said, they've done, here's what they converted on, here's what they didn't. Who do you want to work with? And then we would go and negotiate individual rates and contracts with each individual influencer. And so I would also suggest download Xiaohongshu on your phone. I mean, this is on the Apple App Store. Download, WeChat. Start to search, your particular brand and find the influencers and see, maybe talk to someone in your community that speaks Chinese and can understand Chinese, and get them to give you some qualitative feedback on who might be a good fit, who's interesting for your brand. Okay. Another question from Mark here: is live streaming a way to grow an audience rather than only be tied when you have a large or loyal audience? Live streaming is a great way to build an audience when you have no existing audience. And the way I'll frame this up is, if you have an existing audience yourself, why pay for someone else's unless you're looking to rapidly grow that? And so for new brands that don't have an audience, live streaming is one of the fastest ways to start to capture a community that's never heard of you before. And so it's a really effective tactic for that. It's also an effective tactic for brand expansion opportunities to build deeper relationships with communities that you're probably not a part of, or that are not aware of your particular brand. What are the skincare brands you have brought into the Chinese market? We've brought a host in. US brands would be like Grande Cosmetics, Is Clinical, Tarte Cosmetics. We do a lot of work with Elf Beauty, with the Alicia Keys portfolio, and many, many others. I think our website probably has some good case studies to check out. Okay, again, feel free to put questions in. I know we're coming up on time, and I still have a lot to get to here, but feel free to ask some more questions in the chat below. Okay, so do we need a Chinese bank account? Short answer is no. Organizations like WPIC would act as what's known as a merchant of record for a lot of brands to facilitate that basically as a service. Alternatively, the cross-border platforms like Tmall Global or the big payment gateways allow cross-border payment, if you will. And so Alipay, which is the exclusive payment gateway for Tmall, for example, on Tmall Global, allows effectively a foreign bank account to be tied to an Alipay Global account. So as a US brand with a US bank account, you could tie your US bank account to that Alipay account. Regarding fur products and required Chinese import permits, what do you suggest? So pretty specific question within a highly regulated industry. Effectively, that the requirements are going to be based on the HS codes. Obviously, fur products fall into, depending on whether it's exotic or domestic, it's going to have nuance there. Our logistics team, and Calvin, I know we've had some dialogue on this specifically, so we can go a little bit deeper offline. We can get some follow up on the specific HS codes and the specific documentation requirements for those particular products and those product types. Okay, another question here. What stage of revenue for a Western e-commerce brand would you advise to start considering expanding into the Chinese market? What are your prices to get your service? Is it a monthly retainer? Okay, so in terms of stage, look, we have brands in our portfolio that they might do like $5–10 million a year globally on the smallest end. That's pretty small. It's pretty lean, pretty early stage. The average would be above like probably the $30–40 million a year mark, and into the hundreds up to that billion range would be kind of the average. So a wide range, what we would describe as like a mid-market vertical. For smaller brands that are below, call it that $20–30 million a year mark, it's a big decision. It's a big commitment. The fees and costs that are associated with market entry are more related to what is it that brand wants to do. And so, there's not a fixed fee that we have in place that's like, here's what it needs to be for every individual brand, because it's all going to be based on what is it the brand needs to do, right? So for example, we could go register your WeChat handle and that cost a couple $1,000s, right? Or we could go build a big multi-channel, omni-channel, D2C program, and that cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so really wide range. For ongoing, I think your question on services with us, is there a monthly retainer? A lot of our services do, some of them don't. It's just going to depend on what particular product or service you need from us. Question from Lindsay: how big of a barrier is not having brand registered trademarks in China? So this is a really important question due to the nature of the trademark system in China. China is what's known as a first to file market, meaning the first one in the door with the application becomes the registered owner of those trademarks. And so this has given way to a community or a business known as trademark squatting, where you have Chinese individuals that go and register hundreds or dozens and dozens of brands' trademarks that they effectively own, and they're basically waiting for the call from a brand's authorized representatives to come calling to buy that back, and that's how they make their money. And so it's first, like, definitely just register, like spend a couple grand to go get your registered trademarks filed so that you own those, you have those, and that you're first in the door. That's what's most important. If you don't have them and they're not registered, it's not a barrier. All the cross-border platforms aren't going to use your Chinese trademarks. They're going to use your foreign trademarks, your US, your Canadian, your European, your Australian trademarks. And so you're going to be able to participate, you're going to be able to sell, you're going to be able to stand up an entity that you own and control and can protect your brand. But if you don't have registered Chinese trademarks, any Chinese individual or anyone else for that matter can go register them on your behalf. And now they're on the domestic channels, they own your brand. And so they could prevent you then from selling domestically in the market. So as a baseline, definitely get them registered. It's not necessarily a short-term barrier, it's more of a long-term barrier, and something that we would definitely advise every brand to do sooner rather than later. Okay, question from Mikkel. How much of top line to invest in a D2C strategy via social media, e-commerce platforms, how to budget that? So I'm assuming in terms of D2C strategy, I believe you mean marketing. How much do you invest in marketing off of top line? This is really dependent on, well, what is required. So does your brand have existing awareness or not? Do we have organic traffic, or does all the traffic need to be paid? What is the life cycle stage of that brand? And most importantly, how quickly do you want to grow, and how much do you want to grow? The spectrum here is everything from brands that solely rely on organic content, they basically spend nothing, through to beauty brands that have high margins that are venture capital backed, and they've gone and raised $200 million in venture capital, and they want to become #1 yesterday. And so they're going to invest 50–60% of revenue in their first year on marketing activities and everything in between. And so the spectrum of investment here is very category based, very competitor based. And ultimately it comes down to, what is it going to take? It's not, the goal for any brand should be, how do we spend as little as possible to get as much as possible? And so the way we approach it is we want to understand what activities and investments is the competitive set spending, what's going to be required for us to be competitive within a particular segment, how much is that? And then we want to start, we want to test, we want to learn, we want to optimize, and then we want to scale up on a particular growth curve, if you will. So I'm just looking at the time here, we're over the 30-minute mark. I'm sure some people have to drop, but we can go back to the list here. If there's nothing else from the audience, we can definitely circle back via email. I've got copies of the questions here, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we didn't get to everything, but let's definitely do this again. I really want to thank everyone for their time today, and hopefully we'll speak soon. So feel free to email me. You can reach me directly on LinkedIn, Peter McMath, or peter.mcmath@wpic.co. And looking forward to speaking with everyone soon. Thanks.